The snow had been falling since dusk, thick and quiet, the kind that muffled the world and made everything feel distant, unreachable, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Inside a small café glowing faintly against the cold December night, a woman sat alone by the window on Christmas Eve, her hands wrapped around a cup she had stopped drinking long ago. The lights on the street shimmered through the glass like memory she could not touch anymore, and the weight in her chest felt heavier than the winter coat draped over the back of her chair. She had told herself she would not cry tonight, not again, yet the ache of loneliness pressed down on her so hard that breathing felt like work. This was not how she had imagined Christmas would look, not now, not ever. If you believe that kindness still matters in a world that often feels cold, if you believe that broken people can still find second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Her name was Clara, and for the first time in her life, she felt invisible. Just a year earlier, Christmas Eve had been loud, warm, filled with laughter and plans and promises about the future. She had been surrounded by people who felt permanent then, people she believed would always be there. But life had unraveled quietly, the way it often does, not in one dramatic moment but in 1,000 small disappointments that eventually tore everything apart. A marriage that once felt safe had collapsed under the weight of unspoken grief. A job she loved disappeared when the company downsized. And then her mother, the one person who made every holiday feel like home, had passed away in early spring, leaving behind a silence that no amount of time seemed able to fill. Tonight, Clara had nowhere else to go. The apartment she now lived in was too quiet, every corner echoing with absence, so she wandered the streets until the cold pushed her into the café. It was one of the few places still open, decorated modestly with paper snowflakes and a small artificial tree that flickered unevenly in the corner. Families had come and gone earlier, bundled children tugging on gloved hands, couples laughing as they escaped the cold. Now the café was nearly empty, and Clara felt like the last person left in a world that had already moved on. She stared out the window, watching people hurry past, their arms full of gifts, their faces flushed from the cold and from happiness. Each passing figure reminded her of what she had lost and what she feared she might never find again. She wondered when she had started feeling so far removed from joy, when hope had become something meant for other people. The holidays had a way of magnifying everything, especially pain, and tonight her sadness felt sharp and undeniable. Clara replayed the past year in her mind, the arguments that had ended in silence, the boxes packed hastily after the divorce, the way she had stood alone at her mother's grave promising she would be strong. She had tried to be strong. She had gone to interviews, forced smiles, told herself that being alone did not mean being unloved. But sitting here on Christmas Eve, surrounded by decorations meant to celebrate togetherness, her strength felt thin and fragile. The bell above the café door chimed softly, and Clara barely looked up at first. She assumed it was another customer escaping the cold for a moment. But something about the energy in the room shifted, subtle yet unmistakable, like a small ripple in still water. She glanced toward the entrance and saw a man step inside, brushing snow from his coat, followed closely by a little girl who clutched his hand as if the world outside might swallow her if she let go. The man looked tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. His shoulders carried a heaviness Clara recognized immediately, the posture of someone who had learned to keep going no matter how hard things became. He wore a worn jacket, clean but clearly old, and his hair was dusted with melting snow. The little girl beside him could not have been more than 6 or 7, bundled in a bright red coat that seemed a size too big, her head slipping down over curious eyes that took in everything at once. Despite the cold and the late hour, there was a quiet determination about them, as if this small stop mattered more than it appeared. They chose a table not far from Clara's, and she found herself watching them despite trying not to. The father helped his daughter out of her coat with careful movements, the kind that came from routine and care. The girl swung her legs from the chair, her excitement barely contained, even as the café grew quieter around them. Clara noticed how the man's face softened when he looked at her, how every trace of exhaustion seemed to fade for a moment. Something inside Clara shifted, unexpected and uncomfortable. It was not envy exactly, but a deep, aching awareness of connection, of love that persisted even when life was hard. She looked away, afraid of the emotions rising in her chest, but she could not completely tune them out. The presence of the father and daughter filled the space with something warm, something real, and it made her loneliness feel even more pronounced. As she sat there, Clara imagined their story without meaning to. She wondered if the man was widowed or divorced, if he worked long hours and worried constantly about providing enough. She wondered what had brought them out on Christmas Eve instead of home, what small tradition or necessity had led them here. She saw the way the girl leaned toward him, her trust absolute, and felt a lump rise in her throat. There was a time when Clara had believed she would have a family like that, a time when she imagined children and shared holidays and a future that felt full. The man stood to order, and Clara caught a glimpse of his expression as he waited, a mix of patience and fatigue and quiet resolve. When he returned to the table, the girl's face lit up, her happiness simple and unguarded. Clara watched as the father reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, slightly crumpled paper star, handing it to his daughter. The girl held it as if it were the most precious thing in the world, tracing its edges with reverent care. That small moment broke something open inside Clara. Tears welled before she could stop them, blurring her vision. It was not just sadness anymore, it was the overwhelming realization that even in broken circumstances, beauty still found a way to exist. This man and his daughter were not here because everything was perfect. They were here because they were doing the best they could with what they had, choosing warmth and togetherness over despair. Clara thought about her own mother then, about the way she used to turn the simplest things into celebrations, how she believed love was shown in effort, not extravagance. She remembered sitting at the kitchen table as a child, cutting paper decorations, laughing as her mother pretended they were masterpieces. Those memories, once painful, now felt like a gentle reminder of who she had been and who she could still be. The café grew quieter still, the hour growing late. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and relentless. Clara felt a strange calm settle over her, as if the weight she had been carrying all night had shifted slightly. She realized that she was not as alone as she had believed. Loneliness, she understood, was not just about the absence of people, but about the absence of connection. And connection, she was beginning to see, could appear in unexpected ways, even without words. The father gathered their things, helping his daughter back into her coat, and for a brief moment their eyes met Clara's. There was no conversation, no exchange beyond a simple look, but it was enough. In that fleeting glance, Clara saw understanding, the silent recognition of shared struggle and shared humanity. The men nodded almost imperceptibly, and Clara found herself returning the gesture, a small acknowledgement that felt bigger than it should have. As they stepped back out into the cold night, the bell chimed again, and the café felt emptier than before, yet Clara's chest felt lighter. She sat there for a while longer, watching the snow, letting the warmth seep back into her hands and into her heart. She thought about the coming year, about the uncertainty that still lay ahead, but also about the possibility that not all doors were closed, that not all chapters had been written. Clara paid for her coffee and stood slowly, wrapping her scarf around her neck. As she stepped outside, the cold air bit at her cheeks, but it no longer felt cruel. The street was quieter now, the rush of earlier replaced by a peaceful stillness. She looked up at the sky, at the snowflakes drifting down, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope, not for a perfect life, but for moments of meaning, for connections that reminded her she was still alive, still capable of feeling. She walked home with steady steps, her mind replaying the image of the father and daughter, their simple warmth cutting through the darkness of the night. Clara knew her pain would not disappear overnight. Grief and loss did not work that way. But something had changed. The emptiness felt less absolute, the future less frightening. She understood now that healing did not always come from grand gestures or dramatic transformations. Sometimes it came from witnessing love in its quietest form, from realizing that even broken stories could hold beauty. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the power of small moments and quiet kindness, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs comfort, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most.